Shabbat Shalom, my friends. Even though Yom Kippur is past, I have two confessional statements to make. The first one is following. I am preparing this Torah conversation while the Senate hearing regarding nominee for the United States Supreme Court is going on. I have torn myself away from all electronic media so that I can focus on preparing for our weekly conversation. I harbor no regrets. I really do know the difference between that which is ultimately ephemeral and that which is ultimately eternal. And on the other hand, admittedly, I will catch up later on regarding this seminal moment in the history of our country. A seminal moment as we are finally struggling to learn how to hear, to understand, and to respect victims of sexual harassment, sexual assault. That's the first confession. Second, I know that the Sedra for this Shabbat is connected to Shabbat Chol HaMoed Sukkot, the Sabbath during the intermediate days of the festival of Sukkot, where we are right now. If you will, the reading from Exodus 33:12 and following pushes aside what would have been the expected Torah reading, the very last Sedra in the Torah reading cycle, V'zot HaBracha, beginning with Deuteronomy 33:1. So that's pushed aside for the Shabbat. And I know that on Simchat Torah, in fact, we will be reading selections from Zot HaBracha to conclude the reading of the book of Deuteronomy, and then we'll turn immediately to Genesis 1:1 and begin the process of the Torah reading cycle all over again. The cycle never ends. I know all of this. Nevertheless, I've chosen to focus our conversation not on the special reading for Shabbat Chol HaMoed Sukkot, but on V'zot HaBracha, the last portion of the book of Deuteronomy. Therefore, we can call this conversation Stanley's mistake by choice. So those are my two confessional statements, and since I know that the gates of forgiveness are said to remain open until Simchat Torah, I am feeling very comfortable with my decisions. So let's turn to our idiosyncratically chosen text of Deuteronomy 33:1. This is the scene. Moses speaks his last words to the Israelites, and then near the end of the Sedra, Moses dies. Obvious question. Since Moses dies before the Sedra ends, and since tradition asserts that Moses wrote down all of the Torah, who wrote those last verses that state that Moses died and the Israelites mourned his passing? Not to worry. In one of those little gems of interpretive genius, some of our rabbis centuries ago chose to assert that Moses himself wrote those verses down with prophetic insight and with tears in each eye. Nice. Okay, so these are the last words of a dying man. I am very grateful to Rabbi Nama Kelman for reminding us of what came to be among the very last public words spoken by the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. in Memphis, April 1968. Reverend King said, you know these words. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. And I don't mind, like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will, and He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land, close quote. King, in his last words, invoking the image drawn precisely from our Sedra. Moses is portrayed as standing atop Mount Nebo, been to the mountain. From Mount Nebo, he can gaze toward the hills of Judea and what will one day be the place of the modern city of Jerusalem. So he's been to the mountaintop, and he has seen what eventually will be the embodiment of his lifelong dream. For Moses, lifelong dream, this means the actual physical promised land. For King, however, the metaphorical mountaintop on which he had stood could have been that amazing gathering at the Washington Monument itself, or perhaps what I describe as that invisible mountaintop that was called into being by a rising sense of support for his righteous cause among millions and millions of Americans. From his mountaintop, King gazed upon his Jerusalem, an America marked by a just society, extending full and equal rights, full and equal justice to all of its citizens, regardless of race or religion or land of origin. Our text assigns to Moses as his final words a series of blessings to each of the tribes. He called for Judah to be strengthened, for Levi to be entrusted with the Urim and Tumim, and for Benjamin to be uniquely loved. As his coda, Moses cried out, Ashrecha Yisrael micha mocha. Happy are you, O Israel, who is like you. And so the drama ended. Now, as all good scientific researchers, I turned to Google to find other last words from very famous people. It was a fun exercise, though I absolutely refused to accept what I found as actual and factual. Maybe. Nevertheless, this is what I found. Leonardo da Vinci wrote, last words, I have offended God and mankind because my work did not reach the quality it should have. Leonardo. Leonard Nimoy sent out a final tweet. This was real. A life is like a garden. Perfect moments can be had but not preserved except in memory. And Karl Marx apparently said, last words are for fools who haven't said enough. Marx. Are you willing to engage with me in a hypothetical exercise? Let's try. If each of us were to have died yesterday, and assuming that we were still of sound mind, what might we have chosen yesterday to have been our final words? Would those words be lofty and visionary, like those of Reverend King? Would they be words of self-reproach, like Leonardo's, who failed to reach the level of perfection of which he felt himself to be capable? Would they be philosophical, like that of Spock? I mean of Leonard Nimoy, who focused on life's beauty as being transitory? Would they be sarcastically dismissive of intellectual fools like Marx, people who couldn't write a book as thick and as important as Das Kapital? Or would they be blessings in the style of Moses, blessings that still contained within them overt rebukes for his people's failings? Moses couldn't get over that. Or would those final words of ours have been something else entirely? As I think about it, and as I try to answer my own question, well, you're struggling with what your answer might be. I admit that I don't feel the power to bless others, nor do I possess any perfections of which to lament, nor am I capable of sufficient intellectual arrogance to be totally dismissive of others, nor am I in any way in the same category as Reverend King as a transformative social reformer. So I'd probably stand with Leonard Nimoy of blessed memory. Like a beautiful garden in full bloom, life's joys are not physically permanent, but preserved in our memories. They can enrich us to our very last breaths. And the stories of such memories can be transmitted to those who care to listen forever. The garden, the stories. Maybe that's what Sukkot is all about. So let's close our cycle until we begin again next week with these words taken from our incorrectly chosen Sedra. Torah tziva lanu Moshe morasha kehilat Yaakov. This is the Torah, these are the teachings commanded to us through Moses, the everlasting possession of the congregation of Jacob. From my Leonard Nimoy perspective, Moses is saying Torah is like a beautiful garden which we have to transmit through our teaching and our conversations from generation to generation. Mo'adim l'simcha. I hope you continue to celebrate Sukkot and then Simchat Torah with joy. And may we capture and treasure our most beautiful memories as a priceless heritage. And while we're preserving that priceless heritage, please hit share so that we connect that heritage with others. Shabbat Shalom, my friends. See you next week.